What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Nick and I hope you guys are doing well whenever you're checking out the latest video here on the channel. Today we have for you guys another video in the every single TV show I've seen tier list series. This is part number 6 for it, and I know it's been a while since we did one of these, but we got to continue on with this tier list because we have a ton to go over here for this next part. If you guys do enjoy it, be sure to leave a comment talking about some of your favorite shows that we see today in this tier list here, or some of your least favorite if you'd be so inclined to do so. But we have a ton to get through here and lots of variety to talk about here, so let's just jump into it with our next set of TV shows for this list. Let's not waste any more time and jump back into it with our next show here, which is going to be Night Court. And I enjoy Night Court. It's a pretty old sitcom here from the late 80s and early 90s here. It's actually going to be rebooted here soon. Pretty interesting, with Melissa Rauch from The Big Bang Theory set to star in that one sometime later in 2023, coming out on NBC. But as for the original, I do enjoy it. I'm going to put it in the good tier. Following that, the OG Ninja Warrior here from Japan. This is one of the few international shows we have on our list here. And growing up, me and my brother Matt watched a ton of this on G4 there in syndication. That was one of the most popular networks to play the international shows like this in the US here. I'm going to put it in the great tier. I do think American Ninja Warrior is slightly better in my opinion, just because it has more of a lore to it in some cases, but the OG Japanese version is also a ton of fun. Unlike Nova here, which I'm going to be honest is not that entertaining in my opinion, I'm going to put it in the meh tier. It's okay for, a PBS documentary type of series, but most of the time it's just not very fascinating, at least to me. Next up is Odd Squad here, one of the most, if not the most underappreciated PBS kids shows of all time. One of their few children's comedy series that is not animated. In fact, a live action, almost sitcom of sorts here. I really enjoy it. I'm definitely going to put it up in the great tier. It came out a little bit after my time there. I think I was like maybe about 14 or 15 by the time it came out, but I really do enjoy it here. Even as an adult, you can go back and watch some of the older episodes there, and it is a ton of fun. Oh Sit here from the CW. This was a dumb show. Definitely going in the bad tier, man. It's basically just their version of Wipeout, if you've ever seen it, but just a cheap knockoff version, not very entertaining whatsoever. It came out during the 2012 TV season, which is pretty infamous because of the writer's strike that was going on. So a lot of these networks had to impose these sort of cheaper reality, competition type shows just to fill the void there of the lack of scripted programming there. So you got a lot of these cheap reality game shows, and it just was not a very good time for TV. And this is the remnants of it, just not a very entertaining show whatsoever. Unlike Orange is the New Black here, which is a fantastic drama series here. If you guys kept up with the pilot project I did a couple months ago, then you'll know that I absolutely loved the first episode here. A terrific cast here, stellar acting, super funny as well for a drama, which I'm always for because I'm a big comedy guy. Definitely an A1 tier level series in my opinion. Going down to that, we have another show that just wasn't really for me, Ordinary Joe here. Another one I'm going to put in the meh tier, kind of like a This Is Us type of show, which another one I'm just not big on whatsoever. I had some potential, but it just wasn't really that fascinating the way they executed the story, and I think the lack of a big ensemble cast is something that really hurt them with this show, just focusing in on one character, not really enough substance to carry an entire series there. Our Kind of People, pretty underrated in my opinion, definitely was one of the shows that premiered last year during the 2021 season that kind of flew under the radar for most people, but I thought was actually a pretty well done drama here, almost playing out like a soap opera at times, which is pretty surprising that I enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm going to put it in the great tier. Had a lot of fun with it personally. Scrolling down here, going back to the rest of the shows here, we have Outmatched. And this show was just not very good whatsoever here. It almost could be in the bottom of the barrel tier, but I'm going to give it some slack because I do like Jason Biggs. But if you guys saw the filmography filing, How I Met Your Mother, then you know my thoughts on this one. Just not a good show whatsoever. Just very, very unfunny, not very well written. The Allison Hannigan sort of cameo that she did in one of the episodes was just not very good whatsoever. Just really forced. Yeah, just a big thumbs down from me all around. Over the Garden Wall here, one of Cartoon Network's most beloved series here for very good reason, as this is a very, very well done animated show that plays every Halloween here as kind of a tradition for their network. And I'm going to put it up in the great tier. Haven't seen it all the way through, but the few episodes that I have seen very much impressed me. Gorgeous animation. They're a really well done story there. Some really good voice acting as well, from some big names like Christopher Lloyd, one of the main characters there. Overall, a very, very solid animated series. Is It Cake here? Oh my god, one of Netflix's newer shows. Another cheap reality show here, definitely going in bottom of the barrel, man. I mean, I like cooking shows all the same, you guys know me, but this one is just not it, man. Trying to figure out if certain things are cake or not. Just a dumb trend from, TikTok and such that they adapted to a show, and the execution here is just pathetic, in my opinion, just absolutely horrible. And then pulling in, of course, my man from SNL here to host it. Just what a weird fucking role for him. I just did not get it whatsoever. According to Jim here, another show that I just do not enjoy whatsoever. I mean, I know it has a pretty big fan base there. It definitely was pretty well received back in the day, in the late 90s, early 2000s when it debuted, but it just has not aged very well at all, and Jim Belushi is just not a good lead in my opinion. So another easy bottom of the barrel series here for this tier list. But our next show up on the list, Pam and Tommy here, is actually pretty good by comparison. I was really interested in the story in this one because I'm a big fan of Tommy Lee here, Motley Crue in general. Just a really fun band. And then his story with, of course, Pamela Anderson there, best known for her work on Baywatch back in the day. I'm going to put this in the great tier. This is definitely one of Hulu's strongest outputs from the year, and they've been on a roll recently with some really, really well done shows, and that was definitely one of my favorites of their more recent selections. Another all-time classic here in the form of Parks and Recreation, a great mockumentary starring that of Amy Poehler here, Rashida Jones. You got Nick Offerman in there as well, just a star-studded cast. And this personally is easily my favorite of any of the Michael Schur comedies there. It's a tough choice definitely between this, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Good Place there. They're all great, but at any one time you could pick any of them as your favorite. But right now I've been on a huge Parks and Rec binge, and definitely going in the A1 tier, man. Just finding clips on YouTube there of some of the funniest moments. Definitely the Nick Offerman moments, of course, as the legendary Ron Swanson there, one of the best TV characters of all time. You can't not put it in the A1 tier. Following that, a very, very underwhelming sitcom, in my opinion, Partners here, which I recently discovered as doing research for a video. Featuring some of the cast from Chicago PD there. You guys know, one of my favorite dramas of all time. This one featuring Sophia Bush as one of the leads, and she's just not fit for comedies. I'm going to tell you, she's a pretty good dramatic actress on the show, but in this particular context, just does not really work well at all. It's not very funny. The two creators of it are actually the same people that created Will and Grace, which is a great show. One of the most legendary 90s sitcoms of all time, but just was not able to replicate it here and just really fell flat in my opinion. Next up is Password here, a very, very iconic game show there from Mark Goodman and Bill Todman, two powerhouse game show creators there alongside people like Merv Griffin, probably some of the most iconic names in game show history. And for me, I'm going to put it in the good tier. It's not my all-time favorite by any means in the game show world, but, for what it is, just to kill, half an hour of your time there, you could do a lot worse for sure. Scrolling down here, next up we got Patty's Mexican Table, a very underwhelming stand and stir cooking show from PBS here and Create, which is where I usually see it. I'm going to put it in the bad tier, just not really for me. I'm not really the biggest fan of, Mexican cooking in general. Like, I enjoy Mexican food, but like really traditional Mexican food just really isn't for me. So most of the recipes that she ends up making here just don't really look all that good to me. But cooking and food in general is extremely subjective. So that's the thing with the cooking shows is, depending on the type of cuisine that they're actually making, could be a real hit or miss sort of proposition for most viewers. And for me, this one just doesn't really do it because most of the food itself just isn't really in my wheelhouse. So for me, a bad show in my opinion. As is Peaky Blinders here, which is probably going to be one of the most controversial opinions coming out of this series here, because I know a lot of people who really dig this show. I just could not get into it whatsoever, man. That pilot nearly put me to sleep. It was so boring, so underwhelming. I've said in the past I'm not a fan of British TV most of the time, and this is just another example as to why that is. It's a thumbs down for me, folks. Peanuts, on the other hand, this is a iconic cartoon series. Of course, everyone knows the Peanuts gang here, Charlie Brown, Snoopy, Woodstock, all of the iconic characters that make up this series and the respective franchise as a whole. I'm going to put it in the good tier. It's definitely a childhood nostalgic pick for me. Haven't seen it in quite a while, though, so that's why it's not going any higher than good on this tier list. Next up, we got another YouTube show here in the form of Critical here, Moist Critical, Penguin Zero, whatever you want to call him by. Charlie White is his real name, and he is one of the all-time best to ever do it on YouTube there. Has a very sort of unfiltered style to him, very, unpolished, usually doesn't edit his videos all that much, but is just a super funny guy, man. He can take any topic and throw some great commentary onto it and make you smile here. One of my favorite types of videos that he does is his coverage of the EDP situation from last year that he'll come up with anytime there's new updates or so. He'll always make a video on it, and it's just one of the funniest things I've ever seen on YouTube. So definitely got to check him out if you haven't already. A1 tier is where he's going. Penn and Teller Fool Us here, very different type of show, magic reality competition show hosted by, of course, Penn and Teller, but also Allison Hannigan in the later seasons here, airing on the CW. I really dig this show. I'm a big fan of all the people involved with it, Penn and Teller especially there. Even though I've never seen their first show, Penn and Teller Bullshit, which aired in the early 2000s on Showtime, even though my brother Matt is a big fan of that show. But I do enjoy Fool Us for sure. It's definitely a niche sort of show, so if you're not really big on magic, probably not going to do all that much for you, but if you like it, it's definitely one to check out. It's going in the great tier. Next up here, we have another game show in the form of People Puzzler on GSN, hosted by that of Leah Remini, of all people. This was a show that my buddy Mike actually pointed out because he's a huge game show guy. He's definitely the most well-versed in the game shows for any of us in our main circle of friends, and he watches GSN and he knows that I'm a big fan of Leah Remini, so he had to point this one out to me. And I think that this show is pretty interesting. It's basically just crosswords is the whole gimmick of the show, with pop culture themes to it. So the whole theme of the board will be TV sitcom stars or something. It'll just be crosswords of different actors or something like that. Will kind of be the main theme of the show. But having Leah Remini there is just such a weird pick for a host. She hasn't really done anything in the last couple of decades, ever since King of Queens, of course, but I just find it really funny that they picked her to be the host of it. But yeah, the game show itself, it's pretty basic, pretty standard game show affair. Can't really go too wrong with it, so I'll put it in the good tier for that. Next up, PewDiePie here, probably the most recognizable YouTuber of all time, of course, one of the most subscribed, formerly the most subscribed until T-Series, of course, took him over. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of him, I am still going to put him in the good tier because I just have a ton of respect for him and the brand that he's built up. Of course, outside of just being the most subscribed, he just seems like a really down-to-earth guy. He's always doing charity type stuff and giving back to people, and that's what we're all about here, just trying to enforce positivity, right? That's really all we're about here on YouTube, and the different organizations that he helps out with. That's really, really cool stuff. So even though his content isn't really for me, just the personality behind it is top tier. So kind of, again, balancing those out, I'm going to put him at least in the good tier there. Next up, we have Pivoting here, and this one is definitely not going anywhere near the top of this list here. We're definitely going in the bad tier once again. Pivoting, it sounded like a good idea, right? You have a really good cast here made up of some TV veterans here, but the execution just is not there, man. This is just a very bland, boring, cookie cutter type of sitcom here, focused on, targeting women and just not really the right demographics to chase after, right? That's the thing. And no surprise at all that this didn't make it to season 2, because there just was not an audience at all here. Everything about this show just kind of underwhelmed in every category. So without question, going in the bad tier. Portlandia, on the other hand, from IFC, a very underrated sketch comedy show here. One of my all-time favorites for sure. This is a show that me and my mom and my brother Matt all really discovered a few years ago, and we all really enjoyed it. Definitely going to put it in the good tier here. I haven't seen it in a while, so that's why it doesn't get any higher, but definitely at the time when we were first watching it, definitely some of the most memorable sketch comedy you will find on TV. Next up here, another YouTuber by the name of SS Sniper Wolf here. Definitely one of the more, polarizing types of YouTubers out there. I'm going to put her in the med tier. I don't really have that much of an opinion, to be honest with her, either way. She's pretty neutral for me. The only reason she's on here is, frankly, because of how big she is. Over 25 million subscribers. Definitely seen a few of her videos at one point or another, I guarantee you. But I just don't really have much to say on her, so I'm going to put her in the med tier. Next up is Ride here with Norman Reedus. All my Walking Dead fans out there, stand up, because you guys know I am a massive, massive Walking Dead fan. And of course, Norman Reedus, probably the guy that's been the most famous from the show and really kind of built his name up from the show. I'm going to put this in the good tier, but right at the very edge of it being in the great tier, because with some tweaking, I feel like this could be a really, really fun show. It's essentially just kind of a documentary travel type of show where Norman Reedus will bring on a couple guests, sometimes from The Walking Dead. They'll have some of the co-stars on there, and they'll just go around different cities or different countries on motorcycles, and they'll just see what they have to offer. And it's just a really laid-back, fun show. You get to obviously see a different side to Norman Reedus, which is a lot of fun, because he's just a great actor, even outside of The Walking Dead. He's done a lot of fun stuff. But it gets a little repetitive after a while. That's probably my biggest criticism. You couldn't really sit and watch like a ton of episodes in a row. You could watch, maybe one or two at a time and get your fill of it. But still a lot of fun here, and just to see his interactions with a lot of the other cast from The Walking Dead, like I said, like Stephen Young is on it, Melissa McBride was on it. That was a really fun episode. So whenever they pull, The Walking Dead people, that's always a fun time. Press Your Luck here, another great daytime game show from back in the day here that's still running in different forms now with the reboot hosted by Elizabeth Banks on ABC. I'm definitely more of a fan of the old school style, and this is another one that, again, it's not my favorite game show of all time, but it's certainly, you could do worse for sure. Very, very simple concept there. Definitely going in the good tier all around. The Price is Right, on the other hand, now this is a game show that certainly is very popular, but honestly has never really been for me. I'm going to put it in the med tier, to be honest with you, because the thing is, the show itself is fine. Like, I don't really have anything against it, but I've just never been a fan of Drew Carey. I've just never, ever been a fan of Drew Carey, and he's held that, hosting gig for so long now that it's basically impossible to separate the two. Obviously, everyone knows Bob Barker as well from back in the day, and he was a lot of fun, and I do enjoy Bob Barker, but nowadays, for the last probably like 15 years or so at least, it's been Drew Carey at the helm. And that's just a big turnoff for me personally. I'm just not really a fan of him or his, brand, anything that he's really done. If you've seen other videos on my channel talking about some of his other shows, like his self-titled sitcom, then just not a fan at all about that. So that's just a big turnoff for me. But the show itself, it's not the worst thing ever. So I'll give it some slack here, put it in the med tier. Primal Grill with Steve Reichland here. We got another cooking show here from PBS and Create. This guy, Steve Reichland, has done a ton of these different cooking shows, and they all revolve around either being outside on the grill or barbecue in some kind. He's a man's man when it comes to cooking. He does a lot of barbecue, a lot of smoking type stuff. He's definitely not your typical stand and stir guy, and I just love his personality. He is just so serious all the time, and it is just hilarious to see. Definitely an A1 tier sort of show. There's a lot of times where, especially because he's so relaxed and he's so chill, he'll often forget about the actual food because he's so focused on the audience. And sometimes he'll like fuck it up. He'll burn it or something, and it'll get all black and charred on the grill. And then when they cut to him in the next shot, it'll be totally fixed. It'll be replaced with a different version of whatever he's cooking there. And it's just so obvious to see the mistakes. It's just a lot of fun to see how they tweak with it. So definitely an A1 tier show in my opinion. Next up here, one of the most legendary dramas of all time. Shout out my buddy Mike for this one. Prison Break, of course, one of his all-time favorites. And after watching a few episodes for myself, I can safely say this show is amazing here and certainly has deserved its spot in TV history. This one's going up all the way in the A1 tier. The leads here are fantastic. Of course, Wentworth Miller as the main character here, Michael Scofield, a legendary performance. Actually recently saw him on a couple different shows, including an episode of SVU that I saw the other day with him. He is just a great actor in general, but his definitely top tier performance, like I said, on Prison Break here is certainly what took his career over the top here, and is just so much fun to watch all the time. So definitely an A1 tier style show. Pro Jared next up, another YouTuber here. Yeah, let's be honest here, not really as good as he once was. He was good, but then the whole controversy kind of stopped his momentum there, and he hasn't really ever crept up, the same way that he was back in the early 2010s when he was really popping off there. Just always felt like a watered down version of many of the other gaming YouTubers out there, so never really did anything different, in my opinion, to really set himself apart. Promised Land here, the pilot project again, another obvious example of a show that I absolutely cannot stand here from last year. Probably my most hated show from last year, and for good reason that they just pulled it after 5 episodes because everyone just despised this show. Yeah, just absolutely horrible. A terrible soap opera about a family that owns a winery. Like, come on, man, you could do so much better than this garbage. The $100,000 pyramid here. This is an interesting concept for a game show, and actually one that I think works very, very well. Normal contestant and a celebrity partner have to give each other clues to different words without obviously using the word itself, and then going up against the $100,000 pyramid in the bonus round there, trying to get as many clues as they can within a fixed amount of time. Very, very simple concept for a game show, but one that works incredibly well here. The recent version with Michael Strahan as the host, I really enjoy as well. I know him from, of course, GMA as one of the anchors. He's a lot of fun to watch. But yeah, definitely a great series in my opinion. Next up, we have Queens here, another show from last year that I talked about in the pilot project, and honestly one that I think got a decent amount of praise from certain corners, but definitely a lot of criticism in other corners. And this is one of those shows that I feel a little torn on, because as much as I love that pilot, it really should have been a movie. This is like the prime example of one of those shows that should have been just a 2-hour movie, and would have told that story in a very streamlined way, and it would have been a lot more focused in on what you wanted to talk about, instead of just dragging out the story and having a ton of unnecessary filler and almost turning it into another soap opera type of show, which a lot of people, and myself included, just didn't really like. But for that pilot, at least, I'm going to give it a great tier, because there are some really, really good performances here. The music is a ton of fun. There are a lot of good things about this show, but I think the execution later on just was a little bit overwhelming for them. Rachel Ray's talk show here that she does in daytime syndication is not very good at all, and as a result, it's going in the bad tier. I have nothing against Rachel Ray, actually. I actually praised one of her other shows, 30 Minute Meals, earlier in the series, but her daytime show is just not very entertaining. She just doesn't really have a lot of personality to carry it, and a lot of the guests that she gets on are pretty weak, so don't really have much to offer in that regard. So a bad series is where it's going. Next up is React here, another YouTube series with the Fine Bros, and this is one that, again, is going in the bad tier. This is definitely nostalgic because as a kid, we watched these shows all the time. There was Kids React, Teens React, YouTubers React, Elders React. They had a ton of different spin-offs and such, but the core of the show has gotten extremely stale at this point, and there's been a ton of controversy surrounding it, since its heyday. So it's just a big turnoff now. And if you look at the channel, it has like 20 million subscribers or like over that, and they can barely crack 100,000 views on some of their latest videos. So obviously, a lot of people have just tuned it out, and it's definitely a shell of its former self. So a bad tier is where it's going to go. Unlike Recess here, which is one of the most overlooked Disney shows of all time, they're probably my, maybe not my all-time favorite, but definitely one of my favorites for their animated lineup there. We used to watch the movies that they did all the time growing up on VHS. We had Recess Schools Out on VHS growing up, me and Matt, and we watched the shit out of that fucking movie, man. We loved it. So yeah, definitely another great, solid show here. As is Red Band Society, which is another one of the elite 5 when it comes to the medical dramas here. There are only 5 medical shows out there that I think are worth watching. All of them belong in the great series, and this is one of them, my friends. Super underrated. A great cast on this one. Octavia Spencer is one of the leads here. You really cannot go wrong with whatsoever. Super, super underrated, and a great find if you can find it. A super quick watch, only 13 episodes. Definitely one that you want to binge soon. Just an all-around fantastic series there. As is Regular Show next up, hitting a good pocket of shows here, just a hit after hit after hit here with Regular Show, of course, as one of these legendary Cartoon Network shows from the early 2010s there. This one going straight up all the way into the God tier level. I would honestly put this up there with SpongeBob and probably Curious George. You see up there in the God tier as one of my all-time favorite TV cartoons ever. I mean, without question, a huge nostalgic push there. Great finale as well for any of these Cartoon Network shows. I mean, every single aspect of this show is damn near perfect, my friends, and that's not something I say very often. So if you haven't seen Regular Show, man, I don't know what the hell you're doing watching my dumb ass. Go out, see yourself some Regular Show, because it is absolutely fantastic. Next up, we have Revenge here. Revenge is a decent enough drama here starring Emily Van Camp, a TV icon that has done a ton of different dramas over the years. I'll put it in the good tier. I did enjoy the pilot for sure, but I haven't really seen that much else besides that, and I haven't really had that much motivation to go back, to be honest with you, but I do hear it is a very, very solid series, has definitely a good fan base out there, but just isn't one that interests me as much as some of these other shows, so I'll put it in the good tier as a result. Revolution, I've talked more than I would like to about this show at this point. You guys know, I can't really get into this one, man. I've tried, my friends, but the acting here is so stiff. I mean, of course, Tracy Spriangos, this was her come-up show. This was the show that really put her on the map, so I gotta thank, it for that at least, because she is one of my favorite actresses, but this is just not a good performance by her, but the show itself just feels so, dull and watered down and underwhelming, especially for a dystopian, action type series. If you want a good dystopian action type series, you know what to watch, all right? It's pretty obvious, right? Don't waste your time with Revolution. And also, don't waste your time with Rick and Morty. Another controversial opinion here, but Rick and Morty is going in the mad tier, guys. Very, very overrated. Not really a lot here to draw from as far as like what you can't find in other adult cartoons, to be honest. You guys know me, I've just never really gelled with Dan Harmon whatsoever. I'm not a fan of Community, not a fan of Rick and Morty, so his humor is just not for me. I get why a lot of people like it, but it's just not my cup of tea. So this is just another one that, is in that canon that just doesn't really do much for me personally. right this minute here, easily one of the worst shows on this entire list. This is basically Equals 3 by Ray William Johnson without Ray William Johnson, and it sucks like Equals 3 did without Ray William Johnson. Yeah, it's just them, commenting over viral YouTube clips and such, but the videos they get are just so dumb and boring, and, there's like no commentary to draw from. Like, it's the most simple shit. It's so unnecessary. It's a terrible example of why, internet type culture should stay on the internet and not be translated to TV. This is just a prime example of how not to do it. Next up is Rise here. Now this show was a bit of a surprise because I went into this with pretty low expectations, to be honest, because I'd never really heard that many people talk about it and didn't really know, much of the story. I thought it was going to be kind of like a Glee knockoff, but it genuinely surprised me at just how good this show really is. It's definitely going in the great tier. Josh Radnor here as the lead. Lou is fantastic. One of his best performances in any movie or TV show ever. And the story itself definitely does have a lot of those, like musical drama type elements to it, like you see in Glee and Smash and a bunch of those other shows, but it's really more akin to something like Friday Night Lights. It has that sort of teen, high school atmosphere to it, and it just talks about a lot of societal issues going on with the youth and with culture and society, and touches on a lot of deeper, harsher subjects in a really profound way. So just has a lot of good messaging behind it, and in a very optimistic way really shows you the light at the end of the tunnel in most episodes. So you can really jive with that, and just, great acting, like I said, all around. It's definitely an underrated show that I think, if you're into that sort of style, is totally going to be up your alley. Rising Star, anybody that likes music, anybody that likes TV should stay far away from this shit. This is one of the worst competition shows I've ever seen. Easily the worst American Idol knockoff. I mean, you guys know me. I love American Idol. I will stand by American Idol all day long, but there are some shows that tried to be American Idol later on and just failed miserably, and this is probably the worst example of it. Just a terrible execution here. Absolutely nothing about this show was good at the time, or looking back on it in retrospect, it just got worse. So yeah, stay far away from this one. Riverdale is it's Riverdale. I mean, what more do you need to say about that? It's going in the bad tier personally. I mean, you could make the argument it's so bad it's good, like a lot of people have, and according to a lot of people out there, the new season 6, is like the biggest example of that, like just how absurd and over the top it's gotten. I haven't seen any of it, so I can't say, but at least the earlier seasons, they just had like that very clunky, stiff sort of acting that the CW is known for, just legendary bad acting from the CW, of course, even despite it having a pretty notable cast. Of course, Cole Sprouse, probably the biggest name from it, from the Disney Channel back in the day, but yeah, just overall just has not aged very well, even though it's not that old. So say what you will about that, man. Riverdale's Riverdale, like I said. You can't really blame it, can't really call it anything else. Robot Chicken here. Let's transition to something a little bit better here. Robot Chicken is a ton of fun. It's goofy, it's totally over the top, it's super stupid at times, but man, for a good sketch comedy and animation too, which is a pretty rare feat to see both of those combined like that, but it works really, really well. And of course, Seth Green here, who's been on a ton of different shows over the years, is one of the leads on this show as one of the writers, creators, actors, voice actors. He does everything for it, and he's very, very talented, so can't really ask for much more than that. Room 104 here, easily the most overlooked anthology series out there. Everyone, when it comes to anthology series, talks about, of course, The Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock and Black Mirror, and those are all really, really solid, but Room 104, man, super overlooked. This is a great series. HBO, of course, behind this one, so you know you're going to get quality entertainment there. The Duplass brothers, who have done some great indie projects and great indie movies over the years, also behind this one as the two creators. Great stuff there. And then, of course, each episode being an anthology, you get opportunities to see different actors and different actresses from other shows come in and try something new in a bit of a drama form, which is really cool. The Kobe Smulders episode, fantastic. Melissa Fumero from Brooklyn Nine-Nine was in one, super overlooked. Then you got Rainn Wilson in one of them doing a dramatic performance, which is very different for him, coming from The Office, of course. I mean, there is just so much variety in this show, so many great actors that have dipped their toes with this one. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. A great series. Next up, we have the original Roseanne here from the 90s here, not the trashy reboot as in The Conners. We talked about that earlier, but instead we have the OG Roseanne. And, you know, I dig this show. I do. I'm going to put it in the good tier. It's a good show. It's a good sitcom. I just was never that big of a fan of it being as overly dramatic, you know, overly serious as it was at times. I know that was part of the appeal, but for me, you know, if I'm looking to laugh and I turn on a sitcom, I expect, you know, that's going to be the main thing that I get out of it. And with this show, it was just always a little bit more dramatic than maybe you'd prefer it to be. But I get why, you know, so many people gravitated towards it. It was very realistic. It was very heartfelt. It had a lot of good messaging behind it, and the cast worked really well. So if you're a fan, I can't really take that away from you. I like it myself, but just not as much as some other sitcoms of the time. Rugrats here, another Nickelodeon animated series here from the 90s. This is definitely going to be a nostalgic pick for a lot of people. I never really was as big on it as most others, so I'm just going to put it in the good tier. I do have a little bit of nostalgia for it, but this was a little before my time. This is more 90s, you know, obviously I was more 2000s there, but Rugrats is a huge franchise. It's a massive show, so can't really put it any lower than at least the good tier. As is with Rules of Engagement here, the same kind of thing, a very overlooked sitcom here that had just a great cast to it. It honestly, on some days, could be in the great tier, but it just doesn't have the same sort of name recognition as some of the other shows on this list. So it's going to go in the good tier for now, but still a very fun show. David Spade, of course, one of the leads there. Just an absolutely hilarious comedic actor there. One of my favorites for sure. Running Wild with Bear Grylls we have next. And this show I didn't like as much as Get Out with Bear Grylls that came out around the same time. This was more just like, you know, it didn't really have as much of a structure to it. It was just more him running around with a celebrity in like the wilderness or the mountains or wherever they were. And it kind of got stale after a while. You know, the celebrities would be pretty interesting to see each week, but, you know, the basic format of this show just kind of got a little, you know, cliche after a while, a little, you know, repetitive. So it's just going to go in the meh tier for me. Sabrina the Teenage Witch, I don't really mind this show all that much, but I just hadn't seen all that much of it. Another one that's just kind of going in the meh tier. A little before my time. This was, again, more 90s, part of the TGIF lineup on ABC, which is pretty legendary, but yeah, I just haven't really seen that much of this show, and from what I had, it's just kind of okay. Sam and Cat, on the other hand, is one that you should stay far away from. Don't even try to tell me that this show is even close to the same league as either Victorious or iCarly, because you're just wrong. You're just objectively wrong here. It only lasted a single season for a good reason, and most of the people behind this show, this was like the final, you know, straw that they had with Nickelodeon. Both Jeanette McCurdy and Ariana Grande left after this, and probably for good reason, because again, this show, you wouldn't want to touch it with a 6-foot pole there. Just a really bad, you know, sort of the beginning of the end to the Dan Schneider reign on Nickelodeon there. Just a really bad example of how not to do a teen sitcom. Sarah's Weeknight Meals, another PBS cooking show here, Create Cooking show hosted by Sarah Moulton. My mom absolutely hates this show. It's like one of the few stand and stir shows that she just refuses to watch, which I think is kind of funny. I don't mind it. I'm going to put it in the good tier. It's definitely better than some of the other cooking shows out there, but you know, it's not something I'm going to watch every single day. There is not a ton of vibrancy or personality off of it, but again, for what it is and the genre that it's in, you could do a whole hell of a lot worse. Saved by the Bell, another one that's just kind of repetitive after a while, wasn't really for me. Definitely before my time for sure. Again, another 90s show. I like the cast on it, but that's really the extent to the praise I have, because everything else about it I just feel like hasn't really aged all that well. And I haven't seen any of the reboot, but I hear kind of mixed things on it too. So it just felt like more of a niche show that should have probably stayed back in the 90s where it came from. Then we got Schmigadoon here. I would dare call this show underrated, but it definitely did get a lot of praise and a lot of hype from the right circles, which I was definitely one of them. Basically, if you're either a fan of musical comedy or SNL, this is going to be a show for you. And definitely, I'm a big SNL guy, so that's an easy one for me. But yeah, this is a great show. I mean, definitely one of the best of last year. Season 2 was just announced not more than a couple weeks ago, which I'm super, super excited for. Yeah, it's definitely going to be, I think, one of those shows that it's more of a sleeper hit. And I think with time, more and more people will be discovering the show as it goes on. It could definitely last for at least a few more years. I could see this going until at least season 4 or 5, so we'll have to just wait and see. But for Apple TV, I mean, they are definitely, rapidly expanding. They have a lot of projects on their plate, but this feels like one that they should invest some time into, because I think this could be a really, really big deal later on in the next few years. Next up, Schoolhouse Rock here. We got another iconic children's cartoon show, hugely nostalgic for me. I wouldn't even really call this, well, I mean, it is a show, but they're more like, just shorts that would play in between shows when they first aired back in the 70s, if you can believe it. But yeah, these have been, staples for so many people's childhoods all throughout the years, and playing them in school and such, alongside shows like Bill Nye, of course, very, very educational as well. I'm going to put this in the A1 tier, man. Me and Matt grew up with this. We absolutely love them. We have the DVDs of some of the collections for the different subjects from back in the day. That was a ton of fun. And some of the individual shorts, like I'm Just a Bill and King Junction, they've been parodied to death on so many shows, and it's just always fun to see how they do, a kid's show into, sort of an adult parody. There is always a lot of fun to see the contrast there. So yeah, definitely a thumbs up from me. As is Scooby-Doo here, which is also going to go up in the A1 tier. I have seen recently a lot of people, including Matt, who have just completely shit on Scooby-Doo. I have no idea why people hated Scooby-Doo. I never got that vibe of it. I've always been a huge fan of it, at least when we're talking just about the original cartoon, right? Because some of the more live-action stuff and some of the more recent projects like Scoob, were more hit or miss. But the original 60s cartoon from back in the day from CBS, I mean, that was the gold standard, man. You really couldn't beat that, given, what was out there at the time for children's animation. So definitely one of the principal shows that was super influential for tons and tons of stuff later on. Next up is Scorpion here, a very overlooked action series from the mid-2010s here on CBS. This was one of those shows that I just remember, like, during the time when it came on was like my renaissance in watching just a ton of TV. A lot of stuff from between like 2014 and 2016 on network TV. I just watched all of it, like this and Blind Spot, Red Band Society, The Good Place, season 1 of The Good Place, like all that shit. I just watched it all. I just absolutely loved it. So anything network TV that came out during that time, I was probably on it, like flies on shit. And this was one of my favorites here. Scorpion, man, was so freaking good. It's so funny to think back on it, because there's so many people from the show that were, leads on it that weren't even actors or weren't even, known for TV roles. They were in like movie roles and such. The dude who played Finch in the American Pie movies was one of the leads on here, like just came out of nowhere, and absolutely killed his performance. One of my favorites from the show. But yeah, super, super overlooked. I definitely, like when it got canceled, a lot of people weren't really that surprised by it, because it was kind of, mid-tier ratings-wise and stuff. But man, I wish it could have gotten at least a season 6, because that would have been really cool to see. But as it stood right now, very, very fun show. Definitely overlooked if you've never seen it. Next up is Scream Queens. This is another one that was, in that exact same time frame, like I said, around 2014, 2015. This came out on Fox. Lasted for a couple seasons. Wasn't as big on this one, but I do remember some of the actors from it, like John Stamos was on this, and that was just kind of fun to see him doing a drama compared to, of course, something like Full House, right, from back in the day. But yeah, just a lot of fun, like a dumb horror comedy. That was kind of their attempt at like American Horror Story at times, like trying to do something a little more serious, a little more adult for network TV. And, sometimes it would pay off and sometimes it was just really over the top and dumb. But the cast was a lot of fun, so that's really what made up for it. Broke here, a YouTube original starring Quinta Brunson before her time on Abbott, of course. This was a show that she did a while back, and it's okay. It's okay. It's definitely, I would, borderline put it in the good tier because it did have some moments in the first episode. The biggest issue with it, honestly, is that you can only watch the first episode and then the rest are hidden behind a paywall because it's a YouTube Premium show, and I just refuse to pay for YouTube Premium, to be honest. And since it's an old show, a lot of the other sites that you might not want to go on, right, like the 123 movie-esque sites, they're not carrying it. So I can't really say I've seen that much of it aside from the pilot, but I think that pilot is, had a lot of potential, right? So if you judge the rest of the series, it'd probably be a little higher. But as it stood now, I just say in that tier. Late Night with Seth Meyers here. Probably the best late night show currently on TV, because most of them, to be honest, are not really that good at all. It's probably one of my more overrated genres of TV, because I don't really watch it much at all nowadays. But I do like Seth Meyers, and I think he fits really well with the late night sort of format there. Of course, coming from SNL, that was his domain. So doing a talk show sort of style in that is a good fit for him. So I'll put it in the good tier. It's definitely borderline great because, like I said, it's easily one of the best ones currently in the genre, but still not quite enough to get it up there in the great tier. But a good tier, I think, is a solid pick for it. Looper here, we have another YouTube show. This is just a clip channel of like movies and such. They'll just talk about like upcoming movies and TV shows and whatnot. It's okay, but it's not really anything that unique that you can't find elsewhere. So just kind of fits in the meh tier as a result. Scrubs here, pretty overrated in my opinion. My brother Matt absolutely loves this one, and a lot of people do like it. The cast is really good. Of course, Sarah Chalk on this one that you might know from How I Met Your Mother, like I do. But really outside of that, there's nothing else that remarkable about it. And again, it being sort of sometimes labeled in like the medical, hospital type shows, like some of the other dramas that we've talked about. That's just not really a genre that I really, dig all that much. So I'm not really into that aspect of it. The comedy itself is kind of hit or miss. So I don't know. To me, it's pretty overrated, but I know a lot of people out there love it. So, just kind of one of those shows that, you kind of disagree with the majority on. What can you do? One show I definitely do not disagree on, though, is Seinfeld, because when we talk about Seinfeld here on this channel, it's always that it's one of, if not the single greatest TV show of all time, because when we did that project, of course, this is where the #1 show ended up being, was Seinfeld. And, I can't disagree, because it's absolutely legendary. It has all the right, elements from a sitcom that you would want to see out of it. Great cast, makes you laugh. The emotional moments are there, but they're not, the centerpiece of it. It's the show about nothing, right? So it never had ongoing plot lines. It never had, super stretched out stories or anything. It was just super simple, clean humor that everyone could enjoy. And of course, some of the controversies later on with some of the cast members have kind of dinged it a little bit here and there, but the legacy of it just is held up in such a unique way compared to any other show on TV. You just do not see that sort of universal acclaim for anything else nowadays like you saw with Seinfeld. So there's no way in hell I'm putting it any lower than the God tier, man. This is top tier TV at its finest here. If you want a good sitcom, that's exactly what Seinfeld gives you, man. Scrolling back down here, we have Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll next up with Liz Gillies from Victorious on this one as one of the leads, which is how I discovered it. And I think for, FX, to be honest with you, this is pretty middle of the road for them. But for an average, sitcom, comparing it to it, it's pretty strong, because that's the thing with FX, man. They're just such a high caliber channel that even, their weaker shows could definitely rival some of the best of the best when it comes to anywhere else on TV. And this is a good example of that. Just has a very unique story to it. About a former rock star whose kind of life is in shambles, discovers that he has a daughter from 20-something years ago that he never really found out about or paid attention to, reconnects with her, and then they start a band together to get her career going and to get his career back to where it once was. So pretty interesting storyline there. Obviously incorporates a lot of the music stuff, which is a winner for me. So all around, just a very, very solid, fun series. Sex and the City is, on the other hand, not really something that I would watch all that much of. I'll be honest, the pilot surprised me. I liked it more than I thought it would, but it's probably not something I'm going to come back to all that much, so it's just going to be in the meh tier. Shark Tank, it's a very, unique show. It's probably not something that anybody would have thought would have been as big of a hit as it is, but it's stayed on for more than 10 years now. It's been a huge hit for ABC since it premiered back in 2010. I'm going to put this in the great tier. I mean, I genuinely do enjoy Shark Tank. It's weird because, this is always one of those examples I give where it's totally a show that anybody could watch. If there's nothing inappropriate about it, there's nothing controversial about it, there's no language, there's no nudity, there's no violence, but it's not a show that I think anybody less than the age of 40 would enjoy, because it's about business, right? So it's definitely an adult show because of the subject matter in it, which is probably the most unique thing about it. Is the demographic that it's targeting is so different than most shows, even though it has a squeaky clean image to it, you know what I mean? So that's something I always kind of like to talk about it with and compare it to other shows in that regard. But yeah, otherwise, a really solid show. Next up, we got Sherlock here from the BBC. You might expect me to put this pretty low, considering that it is a British show after all, and it's a crime drama, and neither of those are really my style, but it's definitely done a lot better than most of the other shows in either of those categories. So I'm going to put it at least in the good tier. I was definitely surprised by the pilot myself. I really thought that both Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman did a great job together. They have really good chemistry here. There's a lot of really, objective goods about this show that I can't really knock it all that much for. So at least in the good tier is where I'd put it. Sid the Science Kid here, another PBS kids show from back in the 2010s. I don't think this one's aged all that well. A lot of people will tell you that the animation here is definitely not up to par to some of the other shows that they gave us at the time, and I could definitely agree with that. But, subject-wise, it being very educational, it was a lot of fun for what it is. And again, not something I can knock too hard because it did exactly what it set out to do. So can't really hurt it that much for that. So I'll put it in the good tier. Silicon Valley next up, HBO sitcom that never really got its due in the mainstream the way that a lot of people maybe thought it would, or maybe thought it should or it deserved to, because it was a lot of fun, man. I'm definitely going to put this in the good tier. My dad actually really enjoyed this show, probably more than anybody else in my immediate family, and I definitely saw a handful of episodes alongside him and thought it was pretty funny. I definitely like Thomas Middleditch in the lead role there. I thought he's pretty good. But, another one that maybe got a little repetitive after a while, just kind of doing the same bits about, they're geeks, right? And that's automatically funny. A lot of shows kind of fall under that trap, so, maybe not for everybody, but still, for the right audience, it definitely hit very well. Simply Ming, another great cooking show here from PBS. We were just watching this last night, in fact, coincidentally. I'm definitely going to put this up in the great tier. I think Ming Tsai is one of the best hosts to ever do it on PBS, and he just comes off extremely genuine really, and no bullshit. Like, he is super into the food, he's super into the guests that he brings on. He's not fake, he comes off extremely positive, always optimistic, and can cook some really good looking stuff, man. And again, for a cooking show, I mean, that's really all that it's about at the end of the day, making sure that the food looks good, making sure that people are invested in it. That's exactly what he does. So again, can't knock it for that. 6 Feet Under here, another one that is just an absolutely astonishing drama here from HBO with, of course, Michael C. Hall as the lead here, and just so many other great performances by many of the other actors on the series. I'm going to put this way up in the A1 tier for HBO, man. I mean, this is a league even above what they usually do. The writing here and the concept for this show is one of the best of all time, just objectively. Like, it's such a cool idea for a series in that family who runs a funeral home here. The lead of the family, the patriarch of the family, dies in a car accident, and then they have to deal with the concept of death as, a human condition, right? And not just a business, how they see it running a funeral home. Just a very unique sort of perspective to bring to such a dark subject, and it can be really funny at times too, this show, which is a really interesting narrative to play, or a very interesting tone to have, because again, it's such a dark subject matter, so bringing in that humor in it, lighten it up, just works out and brings that balance that you really want to see. So just a top tier show, man. A1, that's definitely where it's going. Small Fortune here, man, this is the opposite, bro. This is a bad show, man. This is a bad show. Lil Rel on this one, of course, is the host, man, my man, Lil Rel. And I do like him. I do like Rel. He's done some fun projects in the past, but this is just a weird concept. It kind of plays like Minute to Win It, almost, if you remember that from back in the day, but the gimmick of it is so stupid, because every challenge is like on a super small scale, and so they have like, it's like, oh, you got to use these super small chopsticks to bring this cookie over to this plate in 3 seconds. It's the dumbest shit in the world. It's the stupidest shit in the world, and they hype it up in such an inorganic and just disingenuous way. Yeah, stay away from this one. Smart Guy, this is Black Young Sheldon. it's Black Young Sheldon. That's basically my description of it. That's all you need to know. But I actually prefer it over Young Sheldon. I think the show's actually pretty solid, so pretty underrated. SNL here, I mean, guys, it's me, right? If there was ever a show that I would hype up and defend 100%, it would be SNL, man. Like a top 5 of all time for me. I mean, pretty much everybody on SNL at one point or another has gone on to do something in the world of TV or movies or, whatever else, just some sort of comedy aspirations that they have. And most of the time, if it's a TV show, I mean, I've mentioned a ton already in this series of various SNL members that have gone on to do things. But yeah, each week, man, just bringing in new hosts and musical guests, and always getting the chance to see new people crop up every year and bring on, new talent, new comedians that show, what they have to offer each week. Just a really cool concept. And then, of course, just the legacy of it. One of the longest running shows that we've ever seen, especially on this list too. Nearly 50 years now it's been on. So just a powerhouse show, man. Just an absolute legacy of a series that'll probably never die out. I mean, if you can believe it. It's gone on for 50 years. Who's to say it won't go on forever? Next up, we have the Gaming Historian here, another TV show from the YouTube circuit. And I'm going to put this one way up in the great tier. I really enjoy this one. I think that if you like documentaries, you're going to like this. If you're into anything gaming related, you're going to like this. This is just a very well executed concept here of having these high quality stories told in a very straightforward way with not a lot of filler to it. It gets right at the heart of the stories, gets right at the heart of the concepts they're trying to tell. And Norman, the host here, is just a really fun guy and just comes off very genuine again. There's just not really a lot of room here for criticism, because it's just handled so well and it's just done at such a high bar. So gotta go great tier. Son of Zorn here. Just kind of a dumb sitcom from Fox. Good talent behind this one. I mean, you got Tim Meadows, you have Jason Sudeikis, you got Cheryl Hines in this one, who was really good. But yeah, the execution was just not it, man. The writing was kind of stupid. I don't even know. This is one of those shows that it's like if you ever needed to make up something from a different show for someone to watch to exemplify why they're stupid, this would be the show that they'd watch. You know what I mean? Like, this is like a made-up show for another show. As is Songland here, another kind of American Idol ripoff that was kind of dumb. The idea was like, oh, they would write their own songs, right? They're wannabe musicians, not wannabe, but they're up and coming musicians, and they would write their own stuff, and then they would pitch it to real people in the industry that would help tweak it and make it a hit. So it had a little bit more, depth to it, I guess you could say, than some of the other singing competitions out there. But most of the people that were on it were just very bland and cookie cutter, and most of the songs were not very interesting. And then as well, like, it just seemingly happens to be this way for most singing shows, but they always focus in on country. I don't know why. It's always country and pop, which I like pop music, but I'm just not a fan of country. So that's a big turnoff for me. And it seemed like a lot of the contestants fell into that genre way too often. So, like I said, bit of a turnoff there. Sons of Anarchy. I mean, one of the biggest dramas ever on TV. Definitely another big FX show. But another one that's probably going to be pretty controversial of a placement here for some, because I'm just going to put it in the Met here. I thought it was okay from what I saw, but there's just a lot of, cliches with the crime drama genre that seem to be part of this one, that if you're a fan of it, is going to be right up your alley, is going to be totally for you. I'm just not really big on crime dramas all that much myself, as many of you know, so this just doesn't really appeal to me. And I think most of the characters as well are just not that fascinating, to be frank with you. That's just the vibe I get off of it. But then again, I've only seen a handful of episodes, so maybe it gets better. I can't really say, but from what I've seen, pretty middle of the road. And I think the show that we're going to end this part off of is South Park here. South Park is one of the most legendary shows of all time, of course. Just has a great sort of legacy to it, and a great story behind it with Trey Parker, Matt Stone, of course, and sort of their come up, and how this show really boosted their reputation in Hollywood as been being taken more seriously as comedy writers. But yeah, this is absolutely going in the god tier. I mean, it's been on for almost 25 seasons now, which is crazy. They're still just up in the ante. Even recently, within the past couple months, they just signed a deal with Paramount to produce a ton of movies that are South Park based for Paramount Plus. They're going to produce like 10 of them over the next decade or so, which is just insane. So if the legacy of this show can even after 25 years result in stuff like that, where they're signing contracts for decades from now, to still be producing stuff under it, that's just a telltale sign that you're doing something right? So there you go. That's how we're going to end this part with South Park there up in the god tier. So that was part 6, everybody, for the TV tier list here, every show that I've seen. We still have quite a few to get through, so it'll probably be at least 1 or 2 more parts here of this series in the next couple of weeks. Thanks everyone for watching, and have a great rest of your day.